Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the episodes. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. Last summer, I decided to take a road trip across the country. I wanted to clear my head, see some new places, and just enjoy the open road. I was about halfway through my journey, driving along a quiet highway in the middle of nowhere, when I saw a guy standing by the side of the road with his thumb out. He looked normal enough, just a backpack and a friendly smile. I thought, why not, and pulled over. He got in, thanked me, and introduced himself as Tom. He said he was headed to the next town, which was about an hour away. I figured it would be nice to have some company for a while. At first, everything was fine. We chatted about random stuff, where we were from, our favorite road trip stories, that kind of thing. But as the miles went by, he started to get a bit weird. He asked a lot of personal questions, like if I was traveling alone and if anyone knew where I was. I shrugged it off, thinking he was just making conversation. Then he started fidgeting, tapping his fingers on the dashboard, and shifting in his seat. His friendly smile faded, replaced by a tense look. I noticed he kept glancing at my phone and wallet, which were sitting in the cup holder between us. My gut told me something was off. I tried to stay calm and kept driving, hoping we'd reach the next town soon. But Tom's behavior got worse. He started mumbling to himself, talking about how people can't be trusted and how he had to take matters into his own hands. My heart started pounding. I didn't know what he meant, but it didn't sound good. I decided I needed to get rid of him. I told him I had to make a quick stop to use the bathroom and pulled into a rest area. He didn't seem to buy it, but he got out of the car with me. I went into the bathroom, trying to come up with a plan. I thought about just driving off, but my keys were still in the car, and I didn't want to leave him alone with my stuff. When I came back out, he was leaning against the car, watching me with a strange look in his eyes. I forced a smile and said we should get going. As soon as we were back on the road, he pulled out a knife and held it against his leg, just out of my reach but close enough to show he meant business. He told me to keep driving and not to do anything stupid. I nodded, my mind racing. I had to find a way to get help without provoking him. I remembered there was a gas station a few miles ahead. I told him we were running low on gas and needed to stop. When we pulled into the gas station, I saw a few other cars and a couple of people inside the store. I took a deep breath, parked the car, and got out slowly. He followed me, the knife hidden but ready. I walked into the store, trying to act normal, and went up to the cashier. I whispered to the cashier that I needed help, that the guy with me had a knife. The cashier's eyes widened, but he nodded and picked up the phone to call the police. I pretended to browse the snacks, keeping an eye on Tom. He was standing near the door, watching me closely. The minutes felt like hours, but eventually, I heard sirens in the distance. Tom realized what was happening and started to panic. He grabbed my arm and pulled me towards the door, but the police arrived just in time. They rushed in, guns drawn, and ordered him to drop the knife. He hesitated, then let go of me and dropped the knife. The police tackled him to the ground and handcuffed him. I stood there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. The officers asked me some questions and took my statement, then gave me a ride to a nearby motel. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head, thinking about how close I came to real danger. The next morning, I decided to cut my trip short and head home. The open road didn't seem so appealing anymore. Lisa and Tom were on a cross-country road trip. They'd been planning it for months, excited to see the country and take a break from their stressful jobs. The first few days were great, filled with laughter and sightseeing. But everything changed one evening at a rest stop in the middle of nowhere. We had been driving for hours and needed a break. The sun was setting, and the rest stop seemed like a good place to stretch our legs and grab a snack. It was quiet, with just a couple of other cars parked nearby. Tom went to use the bathroom, and I decided to walk around a bit to shake off the stiffness from the drive. As I walked back toward the car, I heard shouting coming from behind the rest stop building. I hesitated, then moved closer to see what was going on. Peeking around the corner, I saw 3 men beating another man. It was brutal. One of them had a metal pipe, and the others were kicking the guy who was already on the ground. My heart pounded in my chest. I turned to run back to the car and collided with Tom, who had just come out of the bathroom. I grabbed his arm and whispered, "We need to go. Now." He saw the fear in my eyes and didn't ask questions. We rushed back to the car, but before we could get in, one of the men from behind the building spotted us. "Hey! You two! Get back here," he shouted. We jumped into the car, and Tom fumbled with the keys. The engine roared to life, and we sped out of the rest stop. In the rearview mirror, I saw the men running towards their car. They were getting in, and I knew they were going to chase us. Tom floored it, and we sped down the highway. I could see their headlights in the distance, getting closer. My hands were shaking, and I kept looking back, hoping we could lose them. Tom was breathing hard, focused on the road ahead. "They're catching up," I said, my voice trembling. "Hold on," Tom replied, taking a sharp turn onto a smaller road. It was darker here, with no streetlights, just the glow of our headlights cutting through the night. We hoped this road would throw them off, but it didn't. Their lights appeared behind us again, even closer now. Tom tried to drive faster, but the narrow, winding road made it difficult. I could see the fear in his eyes. We had no idea where this road led, and the men behind us seemed to know the area better than we did. Suddenly, we saw a sign for a campground. "Turn there," I said, pointing. Tom turned sharply, and we drove into the campground. It was deserted, just a few tents and RVs scattered around. We drove to the far end and parked behind a cluster of trees, turning off the headlights. We sat in the dark, trying to stay as quiet as possible. We could hear the car of the men drive past the campground entrance. My heart was pounding in my ears, and I prayed they wouldn't find us. Minutes felt like hours. We stayed still, hardly daring to breathe. Finally, we heard their car drive away, the sound of the engine fading into the distance. Tom and I looked at each other, relief flooding through us. But we knew we couldn't stay there. They might come back. We got back on the road, taking a different route, avoiding the main highways. We drove through the night, taking turns at random to make sure we weren't being followed. By morning, we were exhausted but finally felt safe enough to stop at a small diner for breakfast. As we sat there, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. We had witnessed something terrible, and those men knew we had seen them. We decided to call the police and report what we saw, but we were also scared. What if those men found out who we were? The rest of our trip was tense. We kept looking over our shoulders, wary of every car that seemed to follow us too long. We cut the trip short and headed back home, feeling like the adventure we had looked forward to had been stolen from us. Even now, back home, I sometimes wake up in a cold sweat, hearing those men's voices in my nightmares. Tom and I don't talk about it much, but we both know we were lucky to get away. I decided to take a road trip to clear my mind after a tough breakup. It was supposed to be a peaceful drive through the countryside. Just me, my thoughts, and the open road. I didn't expect things to go so wrong. I was driving on a long stretch of highway when I accidentally cut off another driver while switching lanes. I didn't even see them. I heard the honk, looked in my rearview mirror, and saw this big, black truck right on my bumper. I raised my hand to apologize, but it seemed to make things worse. The driver started flashing his high beams at me, honking nonstop. I tried to stay calm and kept driving, hoping he would back off. But he didn't. Instead, he pulled up next to me, glaring and shouting through his window. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his face was red with anger. I sped up a little, hoping to get away, but he matched my speed. Then he swerved toward my car, trying to force me off the road. My heart was pounding. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I managed to stay on the road, but I was terrified. I saw an exit sign up ahead and decided to take it, hoping to lose him. I turned off the highway and onto a smaller road. For a moment, it seemed like it worked. I couldn't see him behind me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. But my relief didn't last long. A few minutes later, I saw his truck again in my rearview mirror. He had followed me. My chest tightened with fear. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't drive back to the highway. He'd just follow me again. I spotted a gas station up ahead and decided to pull in. Maybe there would be people there who could help. I parked near the entrance and ran inside. The clerk looked up as I rushed in, clearly startled by my panicked expression. "Please, you have to help me." "Someone is following me," I said, my voice shaky. The clerk glanced outside and saw the truck pull in. The driver didn't get out. He just sat there, staring at the gas station. The clerk nodded and picked up the phone to call the police. I felt a small sense of relief, but I was still scared. I stayed near the counter, watching the truck. The driver revved his engine, then drove around the gas station slowly, as if trying to decide what to do next. I stayed inside, feeling safer with the clerk there. After what felt like forever, the driver finally sped off. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The clerk handed me the phone. "The police are on their way," he said. I thanked him, still shaking. When the police arrived, I told them everything. They took my statement and assured me they would look for the truck. They also offered to escort me to a nearby motel where I could stay for the night. I followed the police car to the motel, constantly checking my mirrors, half expecting to see the truck again. But he didn't come back. The officer waited until I was checked in and safe in my room before leaving. I locked the door and pushed a chair against it for extra security. I didn't sleep much that night, jumping at every sound, fearing the worst. But the night passed without incident. The next morning, I decided to cut my trip short and head back home. The thought of that driver out there somewhere was too much. I kept a lookout the whole way, but I didn't see him again. Now, every time I drive, I'm extra careful, always watching my mirrors, always on edge. That one mistake turned my peaceful trip into a nightmare. I hope I never see that truck or its driver again. I was driving back from a work trip late at night. I didn't want to stop, but my gas tank was nearly empty, so I pulled off at this rundown gas station. It was the only one for miles. The place looked deserted, old signs barely visible, flickering lights. I felt uneasy but figured it was just my imagination. When I pulled in, there were two attendants. One was a tall, thin guy with a greasy cap pulled low over his eyes. The other was shorter, stockier, with a grimy jacket. They were leaning against the side of the building, smoking. I walked over and asked them to fill up the tank. They exchanged a quick look before the tall one nodded and started pumping the gas. The short guy stayed back, watching me too closely. It made my skin crawl. I tried to make small talk, asking about how far it was to the next town. He just grunted, never taking his eyes off me. I pretended to check my phone, hoping to end the awkward silence. The signal was weak, and I couldn't pull up a map. Just my luck. After what felt like forever, the tall guy said the tank was full. I handed him my card, and he took it inside to run it. The short guy was still staring at me. I felt a chill run down my spine. Something wasn't right. The tall guy came back, handed me my card, and mumbled something about the receipt printer being broken. I didn't care about the receipt, I just wanted to get out of there. I got in my car and turned the key. The engine sputtered and died. I tried again, but it wouldn't start. My heart started pounding. I got out, popped the hood, and checked the engine. Everything looked fine, but I'm not a mechanic. The attendants hadn't moved. I asked if they had any idea what might be wrong. The tall guy shrugged, suggesting it might be a loose wire. He offered to take a look. He tinkered under the hood for a minute, then said it should be fine. I got back in and turned the key. Same thing. Nothing. I felt panic rising in my chest. The short guy had moved closer, and now he was grinning. I thanked him and said I'd call a tow truck. The tall guy shook his head, saying the nearest service was too far away and it would take hours. He suggested I come inside and wait. He said they had tools and maybe we could figure it out together. I didn't want to go inside, but I didn't see another option. Inside, the place was even creepier. Dim lights, dusty shelves, and a smell I couldn't quite place. The tall guy pointed to a back room, saying they had better tools there. I hesitated, but he insisted, so I followed him. The room was cluttered with old car parts, tools scattered everywhere. He started rummaging through a drawer, pulling out various tools. The short guy had followed us in and stood by the door, blocking my way out. My heart was racing, and I knew I had to stay calm. The tall guy handed me a wrench and asked me to hold it while he tried something on the engine. It felt wrong, like a setup. I played along, waiting for an opportunity to make a move. He was fiddling with something in the engine bay, but it looked like he was just wasting time. After a few minutes, he said he needed another tool and went back to the drawer. That's when I made my move. I swung the wrench at the short guy, catching him off guard. He stumbled back, and I bolted for the door. I ran to my car, but they were right behind me. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, praying for a signal. The tall guy grabbed my arm, trying to pull me back inside. I kicked at him, breaking free and running towards the road. Headlights appeared in the distance. I waved my arms frantically, hoping the driver would stop. The car slowed down, and I ran to the passenger side, yanking the door open and jumping in. I screamed at the driver to go, telling him I was in danger. He didn't ask questions and sped off. As we drove away, I looked back and saw the two attendants standing in the road, watching us. I told the driver everything, and he took me to the nearest town. We found a police station, and I reported what happened. The police went to the gas station, but the attendants were gone. They found my car, and it turned out someone had tampered with the engine. They never found the two guys. I don't know what they wanted or what they would have done if I hadn't escaped, but I don't like to think about it. I was driving back from visiting my parents in another state. It was a long trip, and I planned to drive through the night to get home by morning. The highway was mostly empty, and it was just me and the occasional car passing by. About an hour after sundown, I noticed a white van in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it. The van stayed behind me for miles. Whenever I sped up or slowed down, it did the same. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe they were going the same way. But it started to feel off when I pulled into a rest stop to use the bathroom and stretch my legs, and the van pulled in too. I got out, walked toward the restrooms, and glanced back. The driver stayed in the van. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't see inside. I used the bathroom quickly, feeling nervous. When I came out, the van was still there. I decided to walk around a bit, hoping they would leave. After a few minutes, they didn't. My heart was pounding. I went back to my car and got back on the road. The van followed. By now, I was really scared. I tried to lose them by taking a few random exits and side roads, but they were always right behind me. I even drove through a small town, thinking I could get some help, but the streets were empty. I considered stopping at a police station, but I didn't know where the nearest one was, and I was too afraid to stop and look it up. As it got later, my paranoia grew. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, the van was there, its headlights a constant presence. I tried to think rationally. Maybe it was just a weird coincidence. Maybe they were lost and following me, hoping to find their way. But it didn't feel like that. I needed to confront them. I pulled into a brightly lit gas station, hoping the lights and the presence of any potential witnesses would keep me safe. I parked and got out of my car, pretending to check my tires. The van pulled in and parked at the far end of the lot. The driver still didn't get out. I walked toward the van, my hands shaking. When I got close, the engine revved, and the van sped out of the lot, tires screeching. I ran back to my car, heart pounding, and got in, locking the doors. I waited a few minutes, hoping they were gone for good. I started to relax, thinking maybe I had scared them off. I got back on the highway, feeling a bit better. But about 10 minutes later, I saw the van again, in the distance, getting closer. Panic set in. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't keep driving all night, and I was afraid to stop. I decided to call the police. I explained the situation to the dispatcher, trying to keep my voice steady. She told me to stay on the line and directed me to the nearest police station, which was still about 20 minutes away. I kept driving, eyes darting between the road and the rearview mirror. The van was closer now, its headlights glaring. Finally, I saw the exit for the police station. I took it, hoping the van wouldn't follow. But it did. I pulled into the station's parking lot and parked right in front of the entrance. I ran inside, phone still in hand, and told the officer at the desk what was happening. They sent an officer out to check the parking lot, but the van was gone. They took my statement and said they would keep an eye out for the van. They offered to have someone follow me home, but I was too shaken to drive any further that night. I stayed at a nearby motel, still feeling jumpy and checking the window every few minutes. The next morning, I finished the drive home, constantly checking my mirrors. I didn't see the van again. I never found out who was following me or why. The police didn't have any leads, and there were no security cameras at the gas station where I tried to confront the driver. The whole experience left me paranoid for a long time. I couldn't drive at night without feeling like someone was watching me. My girlfriend Jenny and I were driving through the desert on a road trip. It was supposed to be an adventure, just the two of us exploring new places. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. We were in the middle of nowhere, and the vast emptiness was both beautiful and eerie. Suddenly, our car started sputtering. I glanced at the gas gauge, but we had plenty of fuel. Before I could figure out what was wrong, the engine died, and we coasted to a stop on the side of the road. I tried restarting it, but nothing happened. We were stranded. We had no cell service. I looked around and saw a small house in the distance, maybe a mile away. It was the only sign of life. I told Jenny we should walk over and see if anyone could help us. She was nervous but agreed. We locked the car and started walking. The desert was quiet, the only sound our footsteps on the gravel road. The house looked old and run down as we got closer. I wondered if anyone still lived there. When we reached the front door, I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Jenny was getting anxious, but I decided to try one more time. I banged on the door with my fist. Finally, we heard shuffling from inside. The door creaked open, and an old man peeked out. His face was lined with age, and his eyes were cold and hard. He didn't look happy to see us. I explained our situation, hoping he would help. He stared at us for a moment, then grunted and opened the door wider. We stepped inside, and he closed the door behind us, locking it with a loud click. My stomach churned. Something felt very wrong. The house was dark and smelled musty. The old man led us to a small living room and gestured for us to sit. There was no electricity. The only light came from a few dusty oil lamps. He asked what we were doing out here, his voice rough and unfriendly. I told him about our road trip and the car breaking down. He stared at us for a long time without saying anything. Finally, he said he had some tools and could take a look at the car, but it would cost us. I offered to pay whatever he wanted, just to get out of there. He grunted again and told us to wait while he got his things. Jenny and I sat in silence, listening to the old man's footsteps fading down the hall. The house was filled with strange, old-fashioned furniture and odd trinkets. I tried to stay calm, but my heart was racing. Jenny squeezed my hand, her face pale. After what felt like an eternity, the old man returned with a rusty toolbox. He told us to follow him. We walked back to the car in the growing darkness, the old man's silhouette eerie in the fading light. When we reached the car, he opened the hood and started tinkering. I couldn't see what he was doing, but it didn't look like he was making any progress. I asked if he needed help, but he just grunted and waved me off. Jenny stood close to me, her eyes darting around nervously. After a while, the old man stepped back, wiping his hands on a dirty rag. He said he couldn't fix it here and we'd have to come back to the house. I didn't like the idea, but we had no choice. We followed him back, the night now fully upon us. Inside, he told us we could stay in a spare room until morning, and he'd take us to town then. He pointed to a door down the hall. Jenny and I walked to the room, the floorboards creaking under our feet. The room was small and bare, with just a bed and a nightstand. We closed the door and sat on the bed, whispering about what to do. I didn't trust the old man, but we were stuck. I suggested we stay awake and leave as soon as it was light. Jenny nodded, her eyes wide with fear. We heard footsteps outside the door, and the old man's voice calling out that he was going to bed. The house fell silent. We sat in the dark, listening to every creak and groan of the old house. Hours passed, and I could tell Jenny was struggling to stay awake. Suddenly, we heard a soft thump from outside the window. I crept over and peeked through the curtain. In the dim moonlight, I saw the old man standing outside, holding a shovel. My heart pounded in my chest. I knew we had to get out of there. I whispered to Jenny to grab her things. We quietly opened the door and tiptoed down the hall. The house was pitch dark, and I could barely see. We reached the front door and slowly unlocked it, praying it wouldn't creak. We slipped outside, and I glanced around. The old man was nowhere in sight. We ran towards the road, not daring to look back. My heart was in my throat, and I could hear Jenny's ragged breathing beside me. We kept running until we reached the main road. In the distance, I saw headlights approaching. I waved my arms frantically, hoping the driver would stop. The car slowed down, and I saw it was a truck. The driver rolled down the window and asked what was wrong. I quickly explained our situation, and he told us to get in. We climbed into the truck, and he drove us to the nearest town. We went to the police station and reported everything. They sent officers to the house, but the old man was gone. They found our car, but it had been stripped for parts. Jenny and I were shaken but relieved to be safe. The police never found the old man, and I still don't know what he planned to do with that shovel. I was on a long drive to visit a friend in another state. It was late, and I was exhausted, so I decided to find a place to stay for the night. I saw a sign for a cheap motel and pulled in. The neon sign flickered, and the place looked run down, but I was too tired to keep driving. The lobby was empty except for the manager, a middle-aged man with greasy hair and a creepy smile. He seemed too eager to help, asking too many questions about my trip and why I was alone. I brushed it off, thinking he was just being friendly. I filled out the paperwork, paid in cash, and he handed me a key. My room was at the far end of the motel, away from the main road. The hallway smelled damp, and the carpet was stained. I just wanted to sleep. I went into the room, locked the door, and threw my bag on the bed. The room was small and bare, with an old TV and a bathroom that looked like it hadn't been cleaned properly in years. I took a quick shower, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. Afterward, I checked the windows and the door again to make sure they were locked. I climbed into bed, hoping to get some rest before continuing my trip in the morning. I woke up to a noise. At first, I thought it was a dream, but then I heard it again. It sounded like a faint scratching or rustling. I lay still, listening. It was coming from the vent above the bed. My heart started pounding. I tried to tell myself it was just an animal or something, but the noise continued, irregular and persistent. I got out of bed and stood on a chair to look into the vent. I couldn't see much, just darkness. But then I noticed a tiny red light, like from a camera. My blood ran cold. Someone was watching me. I quickly got down and grabbed my phone, but there was no signal. I had to get out of there. I threw my clothes on and packed my bag as quietly as possible. I tried the door, but it wouldn't open. The lock was jammed. Panic set in. I checked the window, but it was screwed shut. I was trapped. I heard footsteps outside the door and then the sound of keys. The manager was coming. I frantically looked around for something to defend myself with. The only thing I could find was a metal lamp. I grabbed it and stood by the door, my heart racing. The door opened, and the manager stepped in, his creepy smile still on his face. He said he was checking on me, but his eyes told a different story. I swung the lamp at him, hitting his arm. He yelled and dropped the keys. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the keys and ran out of the room. I sprinted down the hallway, looking for an exit. The front door was locked. I tried several keys, but none of them worked. I could hear the manager behind me, yelling and cursing. I ran to the back of the motel, hoping to find another way out. I found a door leading to the laundry room. It was locked, but one of the keys fit. I burst through and found myself in a small, cluttered room. There was another door on the other side. I ran to it, praying it would lead outside. It did. I was in the back alley behind the motel. I didn't stop running. I ran until I reached the main road. There was a diner a few blocks away, and I ran inside, gasping for breath. The staff and customers stared at me, and I quickly explained what had happened. They called the police, and I waited, still shaking with fear. The police arrived and took my statement. They went to the motel, but the manager was gone. They found the camera in the van and evidence that he had been spying on guests for a long time. They said I was lucky to have escaped. They never caught him, and I don't know what he planned to do if he had caught me. I didn't sleep at all that night. I stayed at the diner until the morning, surrounded by people. The next day, I got back on the road and drove straight to my friend's place, still looking over my shoulder the entire way. I'm just glad I got out alive. Laura and I were on a road trip, aiming to take the scenic route back home. We had been driving for hours, enjoying the open road, but we took a wrong turn and ended up on a deserted road. It wasn't on any of our maps or GPS, but we decided to keep going, figuring it would eventually lead us back to the highway. We drove for miles without seeing another car. It was getting late, and the sun was starting to set. We were both tired and hungry when we saw a sign for a small town up ahead. It looked like it had been abandoned for years, but we thought we could find somewhere to rest and maybe get some directions. The town was eerie. The buildings were old and run down, windows broken, paint peeling. There was no sign of life. We drove through the main street, looking for any sign of activity. Just as we were about to turn around and leave, we saw a few people walking out from one of the buildings. They were dressed in old, worn clothes and looked like they hadn't seen outsiders in a long time. We pulled over and asked if there was a place we could stay for the night. One of them, a middle-aged man with a long beard, smiled and said they had a guest house where we could rest. Something about his smile made me uneasy, but we were exhausted and had nowhere else to go. We followed him to a small house at the edge of town. Inside, it was dark and smelled musty. The man, who introduced himself as Carl, told us to make ourselves comfortable and that dinner would be ready soon. Laura and I exchanged nervous glances, but we thanked him and settled in. As night fell, more people started showing up. They were all dressed similarly, and they all had that same unsettling smile. Carl invited us to join them for dinner in the main building. We didn't want to be rude, so we agreed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The main building was dimly lit, and the dining room was filled with old furniture. We sat at a long table with about a dozen of the townspeople. The food looked surprisingly good, but I had no appetite. Carl sat at the head of the table, watching as closely as we ate. They started asking us questions about where we were from and why we were there. Their questions felt more like an interrogation. Laura tried to keep the conversation light, but I could tell she was just as scared as I was. After dinner, Carl suggested we go back to the guest house to rest. He said they had a big day planned for us tomorrow. The way he said it sent chills down my spine. We thanked them again and went back to the guest house. Once inside, I locked the door and checked the windows. Laura asked what I thought was going on, but I didn't have any answers. I just knew we needed to get out of there. We decided to leave in the middle of the night. We packed our things quietly and waited until we were sure everyone was asleep. Around midnight, We slipped out of the house and made our way to the car. The town was silent, and every little noise made my heart race. We reached the car and got in, but the engine wouldn't start. I tried again, but it was dead. I popped the hood and found that the battery was missing. Panic set in. We had no way to leave, and I was sure they had done this on purpose. We heard footsteps approaching and ducked behind the car. Carl and a few others were coming towards us, carrying flashlights. We had to hide. We ran to a nearby building and slipped inside just as they reached the car. We watched through a crack in the door as they searched the area, their flashlights sweeping over everything. They eventually left, but we knew they'd be back. We had to find another way out. We searched the building we were in and found a back door that led to the woods. We decided to make a run for it. The woods were dense and dark, but it was our only chance. We ran for what felt like hours, not daring to stop or look back. Eventually, we saw lights ahead. It was a highway. We stumbled out of the woods and flagged down the first car we saw. The driver, a trucker, pulled over and let us in. We explained what had happened, and he took us to the nearest police station. The police didn't believe us at first, but they sent a patrol car to check it out. When they got there, the town was deserted again. No sign of Carl or the others. The guest house was empty, and our car was gone. We never found out who those people were or what they wanted. The police said it was probably a group of squatters living off the grid, but I know there was something more going on. I decided to take a solo road trip to clear my mind. Work had been stressful, and I needed a break. I planned to hike some trails I had read about, just me and nature for a few days. The first day was perfect. I drove with the windows down, feeling free for the first time in months. On the second day, I reached a trailhead I'd been excited about. It was early morning, and there were only a few cars in the parking lot. I grabbed my backpack, locked the car, and started up the trail. The air was crisp, and the forest was quiet except for the sounds of birds and my footsteps. About an hour into the hike, I noticed someone behind me. It was a man, maybe in his 40s, wearing a baseball cap and carrying a small backpack. At first, I didn't think much of it. Lots of people hike these trails. But after another 30 minutes, I realized he was always the same distance behind me. It felt like he was matching my pace. I decided to stop and take a break, hoping he would pass me. I sat on a rock, drank some water, and waited. He stopped too, pretending to look at something on his phone. My unease grew. I got up and started hiking again, faster this time. He did the same. Panic set in. I didn't know what to do. There were no other hikers around, and I was miles from my car. I tried to think rationally. Maybe he was just a slow hiker, or maybe he didn't even realize he was making me uncomfortable. But my gut told me something was wrong. I came to a fork in the trail and took the less traveled path, hoping to lose him. The trail was steeper and more rugged, and I pushed myself to move quickly. After a few minutes, I looked back. He was still there, closer now, and no longer pretending to be casual. I started to run. The trail was narrow and rocky, and I stumbled several times, but I didn't stop. My heart was pounding, and my legs were burning, but the fear drove me forward. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps getting closer. I veered off the trail, hoping the dense forest would slow him down. I zigzagged between trees, trying to make it hard for him to follow. The branches scratched my arms and face, but I kept going. I could still hear him, but he sounded farther away. Maybe I was losing him. I found a small ravine and slid down into it, crouching behind a large boulder. I held my breath, listening. His footsteps slowed, and I heard him moving through the trees, searching for me. He was muttering to himself, but I couldn't make out the words. Minutes felt like hours. I stayed hidden, trying to calm my breathing. Eventually, the forest was quiet again. I peeked out from behind the boulder, but I couldn't see him. I waited a little longer, just to be sure. When I felt it was safe, I climbed out of the ravine and started moving back toward the main trail, staying low and quiet. I needed to get back to my car. I moved as quickly and quietly as I could, constantly looking over my shoulder. The trail seemed to stretch on forever. Every rustle in the bushes made my heart race. I kept expecting him to jump out at me. After what felt like an eternity, I saw the trailhead. I ran the last stretch, my car coming into view. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking, and finally got the door open. I jumped in, locked the doors, and started the engine. I sped out of the parking lot, not daring to look back. I drove straight to the nearest town and went to the police station. I told them what had happened, and they sent officers to check the trail, but they didn't find anyone. They said it was probably just a drifter, but I knew it was more than that. I cut my trip short and drove home the next day. The freedom I had felt at the beginning of my trip was gone. I couldn't stop thinking about how close I had come to something terrible. I don't know what he wanted, and I'm just glad I never found out. That experience changed me. I still love hiking, but I'm much more cautious now. I always go with friends, and I stick to well-traveled trails. I was on the second day of my road trip, heading towards the mountains. I had stopped at a small diner for lunch and then got back in my car to continue driving. As I reached for my phone charger under the passenger seat, I noticed a brown package wrapped in plain paper. It wasn't there before, and I had no idea how it got there. The package was small, about the size of a book, and had no markings or labels. I felt a chill run down my spine. I looked around the parking lot, but no one seemed to be paying any attention to me. I decided to drive to a more populated area before opening it. As I drove, I kept glancing at the package, my mind racing with questions. Who put it there? Why? I thought about stopping at the next gas station to open it, but something told me to wait until I was somewhere safer. About an hour later, I pulled into a rest stop. I parked near the entrance where there were plenty of people around. I took a deep breath and picked up the package. I carefully tore the paper off and found a plain cardboard box. Inside was a small black device that looked like a hard drive and a folded piece of paper. The paper had a single sentence typed on it: "Keep this safe." They're coming. My heart started pounding. I looked around the rest stop, feeling like I was being watched. I quickly put the device back in the box and wrapped it up again. I didn't know what to do. Should I go to the police? But what if they were involved? I decided to keep driving, hoping to put some distance between me and whoever might be after the package. As I got back on the highway, I noticed a black SUV that seemed to be following me. Every time I changed lanes or took an exit, it did the same. Panic set in. I drove faster, taking random turns, trying to lose them. But the SUV stayed with me. I knew I couldn't keep this up forever. I needed a plan. I spotted a sign for a motel up ahead and decided to pull in there. Maybe I could find a way to call for help without being seen. I parked my car behind the motel, out of sight from the main road. I grabbed the package and ran to the office. The clerk was an older man who barely looked up when I asked for a room. I paid in cash and took the key, my hands shaking. In the room, I locked the door and pulled the curtain shut. I sat on the bed, staring at the package, trying to figure out what to do next. My phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "We know you have it. Hand it over and no one gets hurt." I felt a wave of terror. They knew where I was. I looked around the room, trying to find a way out. The window was small, but I could probably fit through it if I had to. Just then, I heard footsteps outside the door. I grabbed the package and climbed out the window, landing in the bushes behind the motel. I heard the door to my room being kicked open and voices shouting. I ran towards the woods behind the motel, hoping to find somewhere to hide. The woods were dense and dark. I could hear them behind me, crashing through the underbrush. I kept running, my lungs burning and my legs feeling like they would give out. I stumbled over roots and branches, but I didn't stop. Eventually, I came to a small clearing with an old, abandoned cabin. I ran inside and hid behind a pile of old furniture. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. I held my breath and listened. They were close. I could hear them talking, saying they had to find the package at all costs. I didn't understand why it was so important, but I knew I couldn't let them have it. I stayed hidden until the voices faded and the forest was quiet again. I waited a little longer, just to be sure, then I slowly crept out of the cabin. I needed to get back to my car and get out of there. I made my way back to the motel, staying off the main paths. When I got close, I could see the black SUV still parked outside my room. I couldn't go back to my car, but I needed to get to a phone. I circled around to the front of the motel and slipped into the office. The clerk was gone, but there was a phone behind the counter. I called 911, quickly explaining what was happening and where I was. They told me to stay on the line and that officers were on their way. I hung up and hid behind the counter, clutching the package. I could hear sirens in the distance, and I prayed they would get there before the men found me. The sirens got louder, and soon the parking lot was filled with flashing lights. I heard shouting and the sounds of a struggle. After what felt like forever, an officer called out, telling me it was safe to come out. I stood up, shaking with relief. The officers took my statement and examined the package. They said it was part of an ongoing investigation and that I was lucky to have gotten away. They never told me what was on the device or why it was so important. They just thanked me for my cooperation and told me to be careful. I left the motel with a police escort, finally feeling safe. I was on a road trip, just me and the open road. The idea was to clear my head after a tough year. I drove for hours, the scenery changing from busy highways to quiet, empty stretches. It was peaceful. Somewhere along the way, I stopped for gas and a quick snack. When I got back on the road, the sun was setting, painting the sky with reds and oranges. It was getting dark when I saw him. A man standing on the side of the road, thumb out, looking hopeful. He seemed harmless enough, maybe just another traveler like me. I slowed down and rolled down my window. He looked relieved when I asked where he was heading. "Just a bit up the road," he said. "Thanks for stopping." He got in, and we exchanged names. He said his name was Tom. He was friendly, chatting about the weather and asking about my trip. I felt a bit more relaxed with him there, and the miles seemed to pass quicker. But as the conversation went on, something about him seemed off. He was too interested in my plans, my route, if I had told anyone where I was going. We drove for another hour, road becoming more desolate. The occasional house or farm flashed by, but mostly it was just trees and darkness. My phone had lost signal a while back. Tom noticed and made a comment about how remote it was out here. I forced a laugh, trying to shake off the unease that was creeping in. Then he started talking about himself. He mentioned he'd had some trouble with the law but didn't go into details. My heart sank. I tried to stay calm, nodding and making polite noises, but inside, I was panicking. The road was empty, no cars in sight. I was alone with a stranger who had just hinted he was dangerous. He asked if I had any plans to stop soon, maybe find a place to rest. I lied and said I planned to drive through the night. He didn't seem to like that. He shifted in his seat, looking out the window. I glanced at the fuel gauge. I'd need to stop soon, whether I liked it or not. We drove in silence for a while. I tried to think of a way to get him out of the car without making him suspicious. Then, up ahead, I saw a sign for a rest stop. I told him I needed to use the bathroom. He didn't argue, just nodded. I pulled in, the place deserted. My heart was pounding. I went inside the bathroom, trying to think of a plan. I couldn't stay in there forever. When I came out, he was leaning against the car, watching me. I forced a smile and got back in. As soon as I sat down, he grabbed my wrist, his grip tight. "We're going to take a little detour," he said, his voice calm but threatening. I didn't argue, just nodded and started the car. He directed me down a narrow road I hadn't even noticed before. It led deeper into the woods. I knew I had to do something, but my mind was racing. The road got rougher, and I pretended to struggle with the steering. "The car's acting up," I said. He didn't buy it. Suddenly, the car lurched and stalled. I turned the key, but nothing happened. Great, I thought. He cursed and told me to pop the hood. I did as he said, watching him get out to check the engine. This was my chance. I grabbed my bag and quietly slipped out of the car, running into the woods. Branches scratched at my face and arms, but I kept going. I could hear him shouting, then the sound of him crashing through the undergrowth after me. I didn't stop. I knew I had to put as much distance between us as possible. My heart was pounding, and I was terrified he would catch me. I stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. I slipped inside and hid, trying to catch my breath. I listened, but all I could hear was my own breathing in the wind outside. I didn't know if he was close or if I had lost him. I tried to stay calm and think. Hours passed, or maybe it was just minutes. It was hard to tell. Then I heard footsteps outside. I held my breath, trying to make myself as small and quiet as possible. The door creaked open, and I could see his silhouette in the doorway. He had a flashlight, the beam sweeping the room. He stepped inside, and I knew I had to act. I grabbed a piece of broken wood from the floor and waited. When he was close enough, I swung it at his head. He went down, and I didn't wait to see if he was out cold. I ran, not looking back. I ran until I couldn't run anymore. I found a road and followed it until I saw headlights. I flagged down the car, and the driver, a woman, stopped. I told her what happened, and she called the police. They found him unconscious in the cabin, and he was arrested. I found out later he was an escaped convict, just as I had feared. The police praised me for my quick thinking, but I couldn't shake the fear that had settled deep inside me. I finished my trip, but it wasn't the same. Jim and I had been driving for hours. The road trip was supposed to be a break from our routine, a little adventure for us. We stopped at a rest area to stretch our legs and grab a bite. That's when we met them. They introduced themselves as Alex and Sarah. They seemed friendly, just another couple on the road like us. We chatted for a while, and they mentioned a secluded beach nearby, perfect for a quick dip and some relaxation. Beth was excited, and honestly, I thought it sounded fun too. We followed their car down a winding road, deeper into an area we didn't know. The GPS signal faded, but Alex assured us it was just around the corner. Eventually, we reached the beach. It was beautiful, just as they described. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the water. We set up a small area with our blankets and coolers. Alex and Sarah were friendly, a bit too friendly. They kept asking personal questions, which started to make me uneasy. Jim noticed it too, giving me a look that said we should be careful. But we stayed, trying not to overreact. As it got darker, their behavior changed. They became more intense, their questions more invasive. Alex suggested a walk down the beach. Jim and I hesitated, but we didn't want to seem rude. We started walking, but something didn't feel right. Alex and Sarah were whispering to each other, glancing back at us with looks that made my stomach churn. The beach was deserted. No one else was around. Jim and I slowed down, letting Alex and Sarah get a bit ahead. That's when Jim whispered, "We need to get out of here." I nodded, feeling the same dread. We turned back, trying to be casual, but the couple noticed. Sarah called out, asking where we were going. Jim lied, saying we left something back at the blankets. We walked faster, but they followed. Their friendly demeanor was gone. They were closer now, and I could see a different look in their eyes, something dangerous. My heart was pounding. Jim grabbed my hand, and we started running. We could hear them behind us, shouting for us to stop. We reached our spot and grabbed our things. Jim fumbled with the car keys, hands shaking. I looked back and saw Alex and Sarah running toward us. Jim got the car started just as they reached us. I locked the doors, and Jim hit the gas. We sped off, leaving them standing there, their faces twisted in anger. We drove in silence for a while, trying to process what happened. It wasn't until we were miles away, with a signal on our phones again, that we felt safe. Jim pulled over, and we just sat there, catching our breath. We didn't talk about it much after that, but the rest of the trip was tense. I don't know what they wanted or what they were planning, but I'm glad we got away. It was supposed to be a fun trip, but it turned into something we'll never forget. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision. I had a lot on my mind, so I thought a night drive through the wilderness would clear my head. I loved the quiet, the feeling of being alone with my thoughts. I had no destination, just the open road and the sound of my car's engine humming steadily. I left the city behind and soon the landscape changed. Trees closed in on both sides, and the road twisted and turned, making it impossible to see too far ahead. I found it peaceful, almost therapeutic. The darkness was thick, only broken by my headlights slicing through it. About an hour in, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it. It was rare to see another car out here, but not unheard of. The truck followed me for a while, keeping a steady distance. I figured they were just headed in the same direction. After a few more miles, the truck started getting closer. Its headlights were glaringly bright in my mirrors, almost blinding. I thought maybe they wanted to pass, so I slowed down a bit, moving to the side as much as I could. But they didn't pass. They just stayed right behind me, uncomfortably close. I sped up, hoping they'd take the hint. The truck matched my speed, staying right on my tail. My heart started to race. I didn't know what they wanted, but I knew it wasn't good. The road was too narrow and winding to try anything drastic, so I kept driving, hoping they'd back off. Then, out of nowhere, they swerved, trying to hit my rear bumper. I managed to stay in control, but it was clear they wanted me off the road. Panic set in. I couldn't see their face through the glare, but I could feel their intent. This wasn't random, they were targeting me. I tried to think. My phone had no signal out here, so calling for help wasn't an option. I needed to stay on the road, keep moving. There had to be a turnoff or something where I could lose them. I just had to find it. I took a sharp curve, and the truck did the same, getting even closer. They rammed my car again, harder this time. My tires skidded, and I fought to keep control. I was terrified. My breathing was shallow, and my hands were shaking. I saw a narrow dirt road coming up and made a split-second decision. I turned sharply onto it, hoping the truck wouldn't follow. For a moment, it worked. The truck hesitated, but then I saw its headlights swinging around behind me. They were still coming. The dirt road was rough, filled with potholes and rocks. My car bounced and rattled, but I kept going. I couldn't slow down. The truck was still behind me, relentless. I needed to find a way out of this. Then I saw it, an old, abandoned cabin off to the side. It was a gamble, but I didn't have many options. I swerved off the road, heading towards the cabin. The truck followed, but I managed to pull in behind the building, out of sight. I turned off the engine and lights, trying to make my car as invisible as possible. I crouched down, heart pounding, watching as the truck slowed down, its headlights sweeping the area. It stopped for a moment, then continued down the road, slowly disappearing into the darkness. I stayed hidden for what felt like hours, afraid to move, afraid they'd come back. Finally, when I was sure they were gone, I crept out and checked my car. It was banged up, but it would still run. I got back in, started the engine, and drove back the way I came, slowly, carefully. I didn't stop until I reached a small town with streetlights and people. I parked in a well-lit area and just sat there, shaking. I couldn't believe what had happened. It felt unreal, like a nightmare. But it was real. And I knew I'd never forget it. I decided to take a solo road trip to clear my mind. Life had been stressful, and the open road seemed like the perfect escape. I packed my car, left early in the morning, and drove without a real destination, just enjoying the freedom and the quiet. I was deep into a remote area, miles from the nearest town, when I saw it. An abandoned car on the side of the road. It was an old, beat-up sedan, and it looked like it had been there for a while. I slowed down and pulled over, thinking maybe someone needed help. It was the middle of nowhere, and I couldn't just drive by without checking. I got out of my car and approached the abandoned one. The windows were rolled down, and there was a weird smell coming from inside. I glanced around, feeling uneasy, but I pushed on. Maybe someone was in trouble. The driver's door was open, and the keys were still in the ignition. That struck me as odd. There were papers scattered all over the seats, and the back seat looked like it had been torn apart. I spotted what looked like blood on the passenger seat. My heart started racing. This wasn't just a broken-down car. Something bad had happened here. I pulled out my phone, but of course, there was no signal. I turned back towards my car, planning to drive to the nearest town and call for help. As I walked, I heard a noise. It was faint, like a rustling in the bushes nearby. I froze, trying to pinpoint the sound. Maybe it was just an animal. But then I heard it again, closer this time. My instinct screamed at me to get out of there. I hurried back to my car, but as I reached it, I saw movement in my rearview mirror. Someone was approaching, fast. A man, rough-looking, with wild eyes. I jumped into the driver's seat and locked the doors. He reached my car and pounded on the window, shouting something I couldn't understand. I started the engine, but he yanked on the door handle, trying to get in. I reversed, tires squealing, and he ran after me. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely control the car, but I managed to get back on the road. I looked back and saw him standing in the middle of the road, watching me. I didn't stop until I was miles away. I thought I was safe, but then I noticed a car behind me. It was the same old sedan. It must have been a different person driving it now, but I knew it was connected. They were following me. I tried to stay calm and think. I couldn't call for help, and there was nowhere to pull over. I had to lose them. I took a sharp turn onto a dirt road, hoping it would lead somewhere, anywhere. The sedan followed. The road was rough, and my car bounced and jolted, but I kept going. I saw a small, rundown cabin up ahead and decided to make a stand there. I pulled in behind it and turned off the engine, hoping they wouldn't see me. I crouched down, heart pounding, and watched as the sedan slowed down near the cabin. It stopped for a moment, then continued down the road. I waited, holding my breath, until I was sure they were gone. I stayed hidden for a long time, too scared to move. When I finally felt it was safe, I got back in my car and drove back to the main road, heading straight for the nearest town. I found a gas station with a payphone and called the police. I told them everything, but they didn't seem too concerned. They said they'd send someone to check it out, but I doubted they would find anything. I kept driving until I reached a larger town, where I checked into a motel and locked myself in my room. I decided to take a road trip to clear my mind, get away from everything for a bit. My plan was to drive across a few states, see some sights, and just enjoy the open road. I had my GPS set for a scenic route, but somewhere along the way, it led me off course. The directions became weird, taking me through winding roads deep into a forest. I thought it was just a shortcut, so I followed. The trees grew thicker, and the road narrower. After a while, I realized I hadn't seen another car for miles. I tried to backtrack, but the GPS lost signal. Panic started to creep in. It was late afternoon, and the light was fading. I kept driving, hoping to find a main road or some sign of civilization. Eventually, I came across a small clearing. There were a few rundown cabins scattered around, and I felt a slight relief. I figured I could ask someone for directions. I parked my car and got out, but everything felt off. It was too quiet. I walked up to one of the cabins and knocked on the door. No answer. I turned to leave when I saw a group of people emerging from the woods. They were all dressed in old, worn-out clothes and looked at me with a mix of curiosity and hostility. One of them, a tall man with a scruffy beard, stepped forward. "Lost?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yeah, my GPS led me here." I was hoping someone could point me back to the main road, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The man smirked. "Main road's a long way from here. Why don't you come inside and rest a bit?" Something in his tone made me uneasy. I declined politely, but he insisted. The others started to close in around me, cutting off any escape route. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I was in trouble. I tried to make a break for my car, but two of them grabbed me. They were stronger than they looked, and I couldn't shake them off. They dragged me into one of the cabins and threw me into a small room. The door slammed shut, and I heard the lock click. The room was dark and smelled of mold. I could hear muffled voices outside, and I knew they were planning something. I searched the room for anything that could help me escape, but it was empty except for a dirty mattress in the corner. Hours passed, and the fear turned into a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't going to let them keep me here. I remembered a small pocket knife I had in my jacket. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I pried it out and waited for the right moment. Late at night, the door creaked open. The tall man entered, probably thinking I was asleep. I sprang up and slashed at him with the knife. He yelped in pain, and I shoved past him, running out into the night. I sprinted towards the trees, the adrenaline giving me strength. I could hear them shouting behind me, but I didn't look back. The forest was dark and confusing, but I kept moving. Branches scratched my face, and I stumbled over roots, but I didn't stop. Eventually, I found a small stream. I followed it, hoping it would lead me to safety. The water was freezing, but it helped mask my trail. I trudged through it for what felt like hours until I saw lights in the distance. I climbed out of the stream and made my way towards the lights. It was a small road with a few passing cars. I flagged one down, and the driver, a kind woman, let me in. I explained what happened, and she called the police. We drove to the nearest town, and the police took my statement. They said they would investigate, but I never found out what happened to those people in the forest. I was just glad to be safe. We thought a weekend getaway in a cabin would be the perfect escape. It was me, Emily, and my three best friends, Sarah, Mike, and Jess. We rented this secluded cabin in the woods, miles away from the nearest town. The pictures online made it look cozy and inviting, and we were all excited for some time away from the city. We arrived late Friday afternoon. The owner, a man named Tom, met us at the cabin to give us the keys. He was a tall, quiet guy, probably in his 50s, with a weathered face and piercing eyes. He gave us a quick tour, showed us where everything was, and told us to call if we needed anything. As he left, he gave me a look that made me uneasy, but I brushed it off. The first night was great. We cooked dinner, played board games, and laughed a lot. The cabin was exactly what we had hoped for, warm and cozy with a fireplace and a great view of the forest. As the night went on, we eventually went to bed, looking forward to the next day. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to take a walk. As I stepped outside, I had this strange feeling of being watched. I looked around but saw nothing unusual. The feeling stayed with me, though, making me a little paranoid. When I got back to the cabin, I noticed a small, old camera hidden among the trees, pointed right at our cabin. I called the others to show them. We felt uneasy but decided it might have been for security, though none of us remembered Tom mentioning it. Throughout the day, the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Mike suggested we check the cabin for more cameras. We searched the living room, the kitchen, and the bedrooms. We found 3 more, all hidden in places you wouldn't notice unless you were really looking. By then, we were all freaked out. Jess wanted to leave, but Sarah and Mike thought we should confront Tom first. Mike called Tom, and he came over quickly. He seemed calm when Mike asked him about the cameras. He said they were for security, to protect the property from vandals, and apologized if they made us uncomfortable. He promised to turn them off while we were there and even showed us on his phone that he had done so. Still, something about him seemed off. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard noises outside. I got up and looked out the window. In the moonlight, I saw Tom standing by his truck, watching the cabin. My heart raced. I woke up Mike and showed him. We agreed not to tell the others yet, not wanting to panic them, but we decided we needed to leave first thing in the morning. The next morning, Mike's car wouldn't start. The engine wouldn't even turn over. Tom wasn't around, and we didn't have cell service to call for help. Jess suggested we walk to the nearest town, but it was at least a 2-hour hike, and we weren't sure of the way. While we were trying to figure out what to do, Tom showed up. He acted surprised about the car and offered to take Mike to town to get help. Mike agreed reluctantly, and they left. Hours passed, and we didn't hear anything from Mike. By late afternoon, we were really scared. Sarah decided we needed to leave on foot. We packed our things quickly and started down the road. About an hour into our walk, a truck approached. It was Tom, but Mike wasn't with him. He got out and said Mike had decided to stay in town and send him back to get us. The way he spoke and the look in his eyes made my blood run cold. We refused to get in the truck, saying we'd walk. Tom got angry, insisting we get in. When we still refused, he tried to grab Sarah. We fought back, and Jess managed to hit him with a rock. He fell, and we ran. We ran into the woods, not knowing where we were going, just needing to get away. We ran until we couldn't anymore, hiding in a thick part of the forest. We stayed quiet, listening for any sounds. Hours passed, and it got dark. We were lost, terrified, and exhausted. We decided to keep moving, hoping to find a road or another cabin. Eventually, we saw lights through the trees. It was a ranger station. We ran to it, banging on the door. A ranger opened up, and we told him everything. He took us in, called the police, and assured us we were safe now. The police found Tom and Mike. Mike was tied up in a shed behind Tom's house, but he was alive. Tom was arrested, and we found out he had a history of mental illness and had been watching us the whole time. The experience left us all shaken. We never went on another trip together, and I still have nightmares about it. The road stretched out in front of me, endless and empty. I was on a solo road trip, something I'd always wanted to do. Just me, my car, and the open road. It was supposed to be freeing. But somewhere along the highway, everything changed. It started in the afternoon. I noticed a truck in my rearview mirror, an old, beat-up pickup. It was nothing unusual at first. Just another vehicle on the road. But after a few hours, I realized it was always there, keeping the same distance. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe they were heading the same direction. But as the hours passed, the unease grew. Every time I looked back, there it was. I decided to pull over at a rest stop, hoping to let the truck pass. I parked and waited. 10 minutes went by. Then 20. No sign of the truck. I started to relax, thinking it had finally gone its own way. But as soon as I got back on the highway, there it was again, closer than before. My heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't ignore it anymore. This wasn't normal. Someone was following me. I tried to keep my cool. I kept driving, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. The truck stayed with me, never overtaking, just following. I decided to confront the driver. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, or maybe I could scare them off. I pulled over onto the shoulder of the road. The truck slowed down but then vanished, as if it had never been there. I got out of the car, looking around. The highway was deserted, just me and the empty road. I stood there for a while, feeling foolish and anxious. After a few minutes, I got back into my car and started driving again. Relief washed over me. Maybe it was just my imagination. But then I saw it in the mirror, closer than ever. The truck's headlights glaring at me, almost blinding in the twilight. Fear gripped me. This was no coincidence. I pressed down on the gas, speeding up, trying to put distance between us. But the truck matched my speed, staying right behind me. I drove for miles, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The highway seemed to stretch on forever, with no signs of civilization. Night fell, and the darkness made everything worse. The truck's headlights were the only light in the rearview mirror, a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. I thought about calling the police, but there was no cell service out here. I was on my own. Desperation set in. I needed to lose the truck. I took the next exit, hoping to find a town or at least another road. The exit led to a narrow, winding road through a forest. The truck followed, always keeping the same distance. I sped through the curves, the trees a blur on either side. The road twisted and turned, and I hoped the truck would lose control. But it stayed with me, never faltering. My heart raced, fear turning to panic. Suddenly, the road opened up into a clearing. I saw a small, rundown gas station, its lights flickering. I pulled in, skidding to a stop. I jumped out of the car, looking around. The truck was gone. The gas station was deserted. I banged on the door, shouting for help. No one answered. The place looked abandoned, a relic from another time. I felt trapped, alone in the middle of nowhere. I got back into my car, ready to keep driving. But as soon as I started the engine, the truck appeared again, its headlights cutting through the darkness. It was closer than ever, right on my bumper. I could see the outline of the driver, a dark figure behind the wheel. I sped off, back onto the winding road. The truck followed, relentless. I drove for what felt like hours, my mind racing, trying to think of a way out. The road seemed endless, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being herded, led somewhere against my will. Finally, I saw a sign for a town up ahead. Hope flared in my chest. I took the turn, speeding towards the lights in the distance. The truck stayed with me, but I could see the town now, safety just ahead. I pulled into the first gas station I saw, this one lit and bustling with people. I jumped out of the car, running inside. I told the clerk about the truck, my words tumbling out in a frantic rush. He looked outside but saw nothing. The truck had vanished again. The clerk called the police, and they arrived quickly. They took my statement, but there was no sign of the truck. They assured me they'd keep an eye out, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. I stayed in that town overnight, too scared to get back on the road. The next morning, I continued my trip, but the fear stayed with me. Every time I saw a truck, my heart would skip a beat.